The 6th of June, 1944. Omaha sector, Normandy coast. The water is black glass, and the horizon is a pale seam. In the observation slit, the sea fills the world like a level in a sighting tube. Range drums tick. A pencil taps once, then steadies. Major Werner Pluskat breathes in for 2 counts and out for 1, and tells himself that minutes are a weapon if you know how to cut them. On the plotting table, the first marks are neat, thin, exact. 90 minutes of bunker life. He thinks if the instruments hold, if the cables stay speaking, if the guns find the boats before the boats find the sand. Headset side tone hums the calm of a machine that believes in itself. Bearings slide across voice circuits in clipped German, each syllable placed like a round into a rack. Out beyond the slit, a low smear begins to lift from the dark. It is not a ship. It is an idea with wakes. The pencil hesitates. Sound arrives late, always late across water, but when it comes, it folds the room in half. The first naval salvos move across the surface like weather, a rolling pressure that shakes the table, feet, and powders the concrete. The headset howls, then clears. Shock sound returns to silence in a long exhale. Range again. Deflection again. Do it clean, or do not do it. The oath is simple, and old: no waste, only kills. Fire when they are close enough to count faces. He can almost see them already, because the wakes arrange themselves into lines, and the lines into waves, and the waves into certainty. In the slit's narrow frame, tiny black teeth appear and vanish in spray. Boats. Too many to be boats. Each time a mark goes down on the acetate, another set of wakes flowers behind it, and the 90 minutes shrink to 85 and then to 80, and he feels the numbers sliding under his boots like shingle. Across the intercom, a switchboard man reads back a bearing, and the sentence dissolves in a hiss. He repeats. It dissolves again. Somewhere between the bunker and the battery, a cable has become a fuse, and a fuse has become light. The room tastes of cordite and damp, and fear held in the jaw. Pluskat counts his breath back to 2 and 1 and lifts the field glasses. The sea is now a page of handwriting no one person can finish. The glasses tremble once. He locks his elbows and finds the steady. A voice not his runs through the headspace, short and American, from a fragment captured months ago. Task, purpose, finish fast. It fits the wakes perfectly. He lowers the glasses and marks one last line to the surf. We built a wall to win a duel, he thinks. What is coming does not duel walls. It removes positions. In the 6th of June, 1944 becomes an audit, the moment the first pressure wave finds the casemate. Numbers move from theory to pulse. Concrete that was measured in centimeters becomes hearing measured in seconds lost. The philosophy on this coast is carved into the shapes of its rooms. Regelbau walls, at the regulation thickness embrasures, cut to doctrinal arcs, cable chases, neat as grammar. The promise is that precision exercised early will be repaid later with control. Major Werner Pluskat breathes through a grit of dust and chalk and trains his eyes on the sliver of sea, and for a last quiet moment, the system still believes itself. The cost of that belief sits in the ceiling and the floor. Naval-grade optics, finely machined gear trains, generator sets meant to hum for months, switchboards with labeled strips and tidy bindings. One bunker equals a small factory's pride. The labor that poured this room could have built a dozen anonymous sheds inland. Instead, it perfected this single throat of fire, and perfection is hungry. It requires rehearsal inspectors' signatures that march across paper in black ink. It requires cables buried to exact depths, so they will never fail until a single near miss throws the soil like surf, and the cable becomes fire for a heartbeat, and then becomes nothing at all. Outside, the Allied answer is not a sentence, it is a drum roll. Higgins boats chew across the water with an appetite that mocks adjectives. A carpenter from Louisiana, Andrew Higgins, drew a ramp across a hull and built a door where elegant war had insisted on ladders. The ramp is ugly and magnificent, and infinitely repeatable. Factories stamp them out like punctuation. There is no philosophy in a ramp except entry, and entry multiplied becomes tempo. Pluskat lifts the headphones off one ear. The side tone goes thin, then fat, then thin again as a distant blast folds the line. Shock sound comes back harder this time, rolling through his chest and into the table legs, making the plotting acetate ripple as if it were skin. He knows the argument by heart. Concrete is cheaper than armies. One gun with a clear field and correct data will kill many boats. A wall turns an ocean into a rifle range. But the numbers he can measure with his body are treacherous. Every time the headset squeals and cuts, he counts 3 seconds of blindness. Every 3 seconds is a bracket lost to correction, late a round that arrives where a boat was. He taps the pencil to steady his fingers and finds the tap now needs effort. The tips have gone numb from vibration. He tries to shape the thought that this is not gunnery at all. It is dentistry, with the lights flickering and the patient multiplying. A contemptuous voice from the briefings floats up, one of the coastal experts in peacetime uniform who had toured the works. Let them bring their floating barns. One correct salvo will turn 100 American carpenters into flotsam. The sentence had tasted good in the mouth months ago. Now a different taste blooms, the bitter of paint dust and hot wiring. Outside, the floating barns do not behave like gentlemen. They come in files and columns. When one stumbles, two take its place. When the range seems solved, the line is 400 meters nearer, and the angle is wrong because the wakes have shifted. A clean computation is still clean and still late. Concrete is not the only thing made to a pattern on this coast. The firing charts are patterns too. They assume observation. They assume continuity of message, bearing deflection, fall of shot. They assume a human brain with time to be human. The Allied system budgets no time for that. It buys minutes the way a factory buys bolts by the thousand. Engineers in squat machines nose toward the wire. AVRE petard mortars are almost comic until the charge strikes and the wall becomes a mouth without teeth. Bangalore torpedoes tunnel under the arguments written in steel posts. The logic of the wall was hold the line. The logic of the opponent is remove the function. When a function vanishes, sight message, aim doctrine hangs in the air like a sentence missing its verb. Pluskat has been told that quality economizes force. He believes it, and in narrow duels it is even true. A single well-laid gun can unship the bow of a craft or take the life from a tank in one clean punch. He even imagines for a treacherous second that the elegant recoil of the naval sea, 36 guns at Longues, how they roll back and come forward like well-bred animals, might teach the Americans respect. Then, the casemate shivers left to right, and dust cascades in ropes, and the graceful image breaks under the reality that a weapon with class is still a cavity when the ceiling shakes. Shock sound hammers again nearer, the longer note of a battleship's secondary as an unseen director shifts weight to the battery's grid. Industrial divorce begins right there, when cost and effect separate. The German coast spent its treasure on permanence. The Allied fleet spends on renewal. Each time the plotting room finds a voice, the invasion simply grows another limb. Each minute of communication denied is a brigade's worth of landing granted. The pencil slides a little on the acetate. Sweat has made a film. He unrolls a clean overlay. The old one is already wrong because the world it described no longer exists. He listens for that contemptuous laugh that used to follow, mention of Higgins, and hears only the building's breath, fans, motors, a generator, note deep as a hive, and beneath it a new sound. Terrible, because it is ordinary. Boots on wet sand. If perfection is a promise, its betrayal is physiological. Pupils pinch at a lamp that has swung not because the lamp matters, but because the lamp's sway says the roof is tired. The left ear plugs and unplugs. Fine muscles in the forearm begin to stutter when he tries to draw a straight bearing line. An elegantly soldered junction box hangs crooked now. One screw has walked in its thread with each tremor. He thinks of the inspection that had signed that box off date hour initials as pride, and wonders if the man is alive to see this. Pride as a ledger entry, man-hours, cement, truckloads, billets, rebar, machine time. The enemy writes a different ledger in chalk on the side of a boat, 30 men, 5 minutes again. Tempo is a machine that eats doctrine. It does not argue, it schedules. The wall answers with guns that must be zeroed and sighted and fed precise data. The fleet answers with guns that can fire a pattern wide enough to break thinking itself. Somewhere to the west, Rangers climb a cliff because the argument says they should not be able to. A battery that had been the heart of a map square becomes rumor and smoke and scattered crews. Inland, a static division discovers that static is a moral term, not a technical one. It means condemned to stand still while opposed by people who will not. Pluskat tries to clutch at the old economy, one perfect blow equals many crude ones. A near hit shatters that math not by killing but by making him deaf for 4 seconds. In those 4 seconds, 3 boats finish their run. A private arithmetic takes shape. One concussion equals half a company ashore. Another equals a lane widened. The headset comes alive with a voice 2 octaves higher than habit. The switchboard man is reading bearings as if cold water had found him, and then the bearing dries up mid-number. Pluskat doesn't swear. He returns the earpiece to the cup and counts to 10 because counting is the only power left that no one can jam. Industrial divorce is also emotional. The wall asked him to feel safe inside a system that was beautiful on paper. Beauty demanded obedience. Obedience produced stillness. Stillness, under this much weight, becomes a kind of shame. The Allied system does not ask its servants to be beautiful. It asks them to be many cheap, repairable, expendable. A coxswain can die, and the wave still functions, because the function is the wave, not the man. A casemate commander can be perfect, and the system still fails, because the system requires the world outside the slit to hold still, and it will not. Shock sound arrives a third time, lower, lazier, a bass you feel in the teeth. The lamp stutters. A thin streamer of dust runs along the ceiling seam like a line on a map. In that moment, the axis of the argument flips. The question is no longer, can we kill enough before they land? It becomes, how fast can they replace what we kill? A philosophy that grew up admiring measured salvos is forced to look at replenishment rates and ferry cycles, at how many men, per hour per beach, live to touch dry sand. It is an arithmetic that lives far from honor, and it wins. He grips the pencil until the knuckles go pale and thinks suddenly and clearly about time as a commodity. Their wall bought hours in advance and stored them in concrete. The enemy pays for minutes at the point of sale and never runs out of coin. The divorce is final when he accepts that his trade range deflection correction cannot keep pace with the enemy's. Trade arrive, unload, repeat. The headset returns with a single coherent sentence, a bearing he can use, and he works it clean, and the round goes, and somewhere something dies, and nothing changes, in the only metric that matters now, boots per minute. Counting turns to movement, and movement is the trap. The first opening moves are exactly as the doctrine rehearsed them, and for 3 immaculate minutes, the wall looks like the shape of victory. Major Werner Pluskat gets a stable bearing, the headset clears, and the gun line answers like a choir. Crisp acknowledgements, safeties off breech blocks, snapping forward with that tidy clack that always felt like competence. A near column of landing craft paddles through a patch of smoke and shows a flank. The fall of shot walks in over short left-right and then satisfyingly on. One craft lurches as if kicked under the ribs. Men spill in the wake. The sea takes some and throws others nearer the sand than they had planned. For a narrow slice of time, the arithmetic swings back toward the bunker. He watches for the second flash and gets it another LCVP, stutters and slews coxswain, fighting the tiller, while the stern chews foam like a dog. He can feel the room's posture change spines, straighten a laugh, escape someone who has no right to laugh and clamps itself shut a beat later. The pencil draws a clean correction, and the batteries to left and right take the cue. A stitched line of fountains marches toward the beach like buttonholes. It is almost elegant. Almost. He lets his breath ride 2 and 1 and accepts with relief that tastes like shame that the math still works when the inputs behave. Shock sound arrives again without courtesy. It does not knock. It moves the whole bunker half an inch and leaves it where it found it. A low instrument from a ship too far out to see a long, patient note that loads the teeth and the hinge of the jaw until the jaw decides for itself to relax. The plotting acetate lifts and settles with the pressure wave. A coffee tin shuffles an inch and rings like a bell when it stops. When the headphones return him to the world has shuffled too. The line of wakes is no longer a line. It is a set of braided streams, one part slowing under fire, another part accelerating into the gap, a third part already unloading into water up to the waist, while the tide tries to decide whether to help or betray them. He reaches for the switch to bring a secondary line into the net and finds his fingers slippery. Not sweat. Fine dust has oiled the skin. A tremor inhabits the tendons that once could lay a rule-straight line on a map. The switch clicks over and gives him a new voice. The battery to the east, reporting optical blackout smoke, drifting into embrasures periscope prisms gritted. The voice is steady but pitched higher. The man is acting his usual composure through lungs that will not settle. Pluskat stamps a blemish out of his own voice and reads back the correction. The gun answers. The gun fires. Somewhere a third landing craft flinches, then steadies, then keeps coming. The trap is not the boats that die. It is the boats that do not need to live longer than 4 minutes. He sees it when a damaged LCVP runs itself aground. On purpose engine coughing, bow door jammed. Men tumble over the sides and through the shallow surf, while another boat shoulders around the wreck like a brother shoving through a doorway. The wall had always imagined that killing the boat killed the plan. The plan, it turns out, will use a dead boat as furniture. Discipline does what it has been trained to do. Batteries take partial data and make good guesses. A forward observer, dazed and bleeding at the hairline, crawls up to a periscope and rubs the lens with the clean corner of a sleeve that is not clean enough. A young fire control NCO, who has spent 2 years lecturing his mates about noise and signal, now writes bearings with a hand whose knuckles bounce like a telegraph key. The math is still the math. He gropes for it like a banister in a stairwell gone dark, his wrist jerking at each new concussion, as if someone else were steering the pencil. He finds the numbers, nails them to the net, and in return gets static, then a word, then static again. The precise move comes from doctrine's heart: hold fire, until the targets are fat with men. They do. A cluster takes a hit in the water and stops resembling a plan. For a minute there is the ugly human sound that everyone pretends not to hear when they read war as hard numbers. Then the wave is past that moment and into another, an engineer team dragging a Bangalore torpedo through foam, a second team hauling a roll of something that wants to be bridge and fascine and absurdity all at once. On a better day, he would admire the improvisation. On this day, the admiration curdles into the knowledge that his craft, the craft of perfect blows, has become a boutique product in a market that wants bulk. He gives an order he would have scolded in training: fire a bracket on smoke, not the thing the smoke hides. It is a wasteful order, and he knows it, and he hears himself saying it anyway, because the smoke is the enemy now. It cuts the cords between the observation slit and the world. The first rounds land with that particular slap that wet sand gives back. He watches the haze thin, then thicken, then pour as new shells tear air into the mist. The fort's own counter-battery guns answer with a different rhythm, slower, deeper, like someone counting in a foreign language, and he realizes he is matching his breath to their pulses without meaning to. He stops. He returns to 2 and 1. He clings to the metronome, because the metronome is the last wall left. Saturation translates into the body as fatigue that refuses to explain itself. A tiny muscle under his left eye jumps to its own private timetable. The skin at the back of his neck has decided the bunker is too small and is trying to crawl away from the collar. The headset has acquired a weight it never had. His neck treats it like a child he cannot put down. He argues with the map as if the map were a person. Why are you wrong when I am right? And the map answers with lines that no longer mean what they meant at dawn. Tide writes a new coastline, a meter at a time. Wakes draw new lanes that were never in the manual. Naval batteries bloom where no one had budgeted them. In the neat margins, someone's thumb has left a greasy crescent that looks like the moon. Shock sound returns the third time slower, like a door closing in the next room. A seam in the ceiling sifts dust onto the plotting table in a thin dune. The dune slides when the bunker settles back onto its foundations. He thinks uninvited of the Regelbau catalogue, the dignified drawings with their proud profiles and little men drawn to scale. Those little men never cough. They never blink grit out of their eyes. They never run out of clean overlays at the exact moment the world insists on a new one. Opening moves are supposed to be the clean part. On this morning, they are where the shame begins. He is doing everything right, bearing deflection rate, and the effect is still wrong because the effect has been priced in by the other side. A lane blown by an AVRE is not a tactical event. It is an invoice paid on time. A craft turned to driftwood does not reduce capacity. Capacity rides the next 4 hulls, and the next 4 behind those. There is a moment when a ranger clings to a rope on a cliff face that the sea sprays like a pet. Pluskat wants to blink it away, but his eyes will not obey. The man climbs. The cliff was not supposed to be climbable. The battery the man climbs for may not even be there anymore, and still he climbs, because in the other doctrine, a good plan that arrives late is worse than a crude plan that arrives exactly now. The saturation trap closes on the nerves first and the faith second. He hears himself issuing a correction with syllables too round, too careful, like a man teaching himself to speak again after a stroke. He missays a number and corrects it. The bearer repeats the wrong number anyway, because the line has stolen the truth between them. He orders a check on ammunition expenditure and gets a silence fat with embarrassment. The ledger in his head, so proud of its margins, finds itself scrawled across by urgencies. Replace the blown periscope mirror. Send a runner, because the line is sulking. Find a man with hands small enough to reach a fuse in a box that was never meant to be opened under bombardment. He picks up the pencil and drops it, because the pads of his fingers cannot find friction on the dust anymore. Outside, the beach has become an organism. It grows organs as he watches a knot of men at the shingle that will soon be a strong point, a ribbon of movement cut through the wire that will soon be a road, a shape of steel nosing end-on into the edge of a dune that will soon be a gun. The organism makes a grotesque kind of sense. It does not wait for perfect inputs. It takes partials and builds with them like a child with mismatched blocks that nevertheless becomes a tower. The organism does not care about elegance, because elegance cannot be made in bulk at speed. It cares about occupation. It cares about minutes. It cares about repeating the act of arrival until the act itself becomes landscape. He sees the futility of metric Y throughput when a team that should have died 3 times stands up again behind a plate of scavenged steel and begins firing down the length of the beach they just crossed. Their rate of fire is clumsy. Men shake reloads into the sand and curse and fix it and keep going. But clumsy multiplied by enough hands creates a rhythm that eats seconds, and seconds are what his wall used to own. The first time a machine gun on the Allied side cuts a neat zipper across the surf, just where the next wave wants to step, he feels a private crack. That zipper answers his world with a mirror. See, we can lay a pattern too. Ours is ugly. Ours is here. He tries again for excellence. One salvo falls so well that even he cannot deny the thrill of it. A boat converts into splinters and smoke. The smoke throws a curtain that saves the next 3 boats from being seen at all. He learns in a single heartbeat how a perfect strike can become a kindness to the enemy's mass. The realization hits him in the stomach more than in the head. He bends a little at the waist and finds he has, without noticing, braced a palm on the table as if it were the rail of a ship in a swell. He takes the hand away. He forces it behind his back. He tells himself that posture is a weapon. His spine obeys like an old friend finding the rhythm of a march. Discipline does not dissolve all at once. It becomes thinner and thinner until it can be seen through. Orders still go out. Some even return with actions attached. But beside each order, a ghost version appears, written by the conditions: do this instead, do it faster, do not do it at all, because it will not matter in time. He risks a sentence on the net that is not in the manual: ignore the targets in the shallows. Take the far ones closing at speed, and knows as he says it that the sentence is treason to the oath. No, waste only kills. He is choosing waste because waste now is what keeps the wall alive another 20 minutes. Shock sound makes a last pronouncement for this hour, a huge patient thud that arrives as a lesson rather than a blow. The lamp does not swing this time. It surrenders, steadies, and preserves its small circle of light like a monk over a candle in rain. Under that light, his overlay shows a beach that is no longer hypothetical. Paths clusters a second line forming behind the first, the shapes that mean command posts and ammunition points and the beginnings of an inland push. His precise, brilliant opening has been swallowed not by error but by appetite. Skill has not failed. It has been devalued by abundance. The saturation trap is complete when he accepts the new price of a minute. It is no longer bought with bearings. It is bought with bodies that keep coming. He sets the pencil down, and it rolls a little and stops against a ridge of dust like a very small wall. He leaves it there because the next thing he needs to do is not draw. It is decide how to husband the last modest energy of a system designed for poise against an enemy designed for momentum. He looks through the slit one more time and sees not boats but replacements stacked to the horizon. He raises the headset and makes his voice flat. He gives an order that will keep the guns alive, not glorious, for an hour. And in giving it, he feels the doctrine that made him crack like a shell, put back on a shelf, pretty admirable, and not for use anymore. Turning is not a clean word here. It grinds. The room is now a cabinet of vibrating objects, and inside it, the last delicate parts of Major Werner Pluskat's creed begin to rattle loose. The overlay has become a palimpsest: erasures, greasy thumbprints, handwriting, layered until letters collapse into weather. Outside, the organism on the beach grows cleverer by the minute. It sprouts a ribbon of smoke, where there was none, then grows a tooth of steel, where the ribbon thickens, then sends skirmishers through the tooth's shadow, as if the shadow itself were armor. He knows the counter to each move on paper. On paper, paper never runs out. A call stabs through. Left battery requests. Correction. No observation prisms. Fouled aperture down to a slot. He issues the clean solution by habit and receives back only a fragment, a syllable dragged across wire like a bent nail. He repeats in that patient, measured voice. They trained into him, the one that can make panic feel like a scheduling error. The wall shakes to a low, distant pronouncement. Shock sound does not hurry. It moves the breath in his lungs the way a tide moves a beached boat. When the pressure unwinds, the ceiling gives back a fine rain, and the lamp steadies, but the steady is mockery now. It illuminates the shame too well. He has kept faith with an oath that sounded modest and became a religion no waste only kills. Now, he watches waste win. Smoke thrown by the enemy turns his skill into theater. A perfect salvo lands on the far edge of a white curtain and murders air. The curtain billows and does its true job concealment as clockwork. A runner appears at his elbow, with lips too red from biting, and holds out a note damp with sweat. East phone trunk cut again. Switchboard routes through reserve. Expect delay. The word delay is the hinge. He feels it swing. Behind it sits irrelevance like a guest at his own table. He hears himself say, shift to suppression on the far lane. Pattern fire. Walk it whether you see or not. It is treason to the sentence that has lived in his mouth for years. Waste not kills. He waits for the part of him that will leap up and strike his own voice, and nothing leaps. The nothing is the wound. A junior in the next room, whose name he cannot bring to mind, repeats the order with a wobble in it and throws a switch. Breach blocks run. The bunker inhales cordite and coughs grit. Kinetic consequence follows fast because that is the trade now. The far lane coughs back, return tracers a different tempo, American impatience, singing as a line, not as a note. Pluskat marks the pattern with a pencil. He can no longer keep straight. He feels a pulse in his wrists that is not his pulse. It belongs to the concrete. Heart rate punches up 80-90, then hides from him behind task focus. His breath loses the old metronome. He tries to pull it back to 2 and 1 and cannot find the handle. Tunnel sound takes the headset and puts it inside his skull. The room recedes to a little theater seen through the wrong end of a field glass. He violates the oath again. Cease on discrete targets. Sustain blind barrage against the shingle. It is uglier the second time because it is easier. The gunners answer with fatigue in the syllables but no hesitation. Someone's cough becomes a saw blade behind him. He hates the cough, not the man, and he hates himself for the misdirected hatred. The barrage goes out. It comes back as behavior in the organism. Men slow down there, stumble, fall. Then a team appears with something on poles, and the slow section produces its own smoke to grow a new path around his fire, like ivy skirting a wall. He orders a displacement of observers, another blasphemy. The doctrine says the eyes must stay to keep the hands honest. He sends the eyes away because eyes now attract punishment. A corporal, with the calm of a man who has never done this under bombardment, says too loudly that the new pit is not ready, and Pluskat snaps. Go. The corporal goes, and within a minute a shell turns the not yet pit into a sufficient pit. Shame arrives not as a flush, but as a hollowness under the sternum that his body mistakes for hunger. He swallows. The taste is rust. Around the edges of vision, irrelevance gathers like soot. He catches himself measuring not effects but intervals. How long until the switchboard catches? How long until the lamp swings? How long until the next shock writes a chalk line across the ceiling? He used to count kills and corrections. Now he counts seconds of system life. This counting is not defeatist. It is bookkeeping for a firm that has changed its product without telling its clerks. He accepts the new ledger against his will. That acceptance is the turn. The beach organism proves its new organs. A filigree of movement along the waterline becomes a rudiment of command, hand signals, flags. Then none of that, because someone with a whistle has found a workable pitch even in all this. The enemy's rate of fire on the flank acquires a competence he resents because competence acknowledges the world, and he is busy trying to enforce a world that no longer exists. He imagines treacherously being that man behind that scavenged plate, feeling the idiotic joy of a weapon that works in the exact second you need it. The thought exits as quickly as it entered, ashamed of itself, but the wake it leaves is worse envy of utility. Shock sound folds him a fourth time. He thinks the lamp will finally surrender, but it holds. Instead, the plotting table skids a centimeter and leaves two clean, bright tracks through the dust rails in a wasteland. The simple physical fact of the tracks rebels him. He stiffens jaw, locking hard enough to click. A youngster touches the table to push it home and earns a slap on the back of the hand from a sergeant who has decided that touching things is how death finds you. The sergeant meets Pluskat's eye and looks away first. Authority is intact in the frame, not in the structure. The headset gives him a gift, a full unbroken sentence from the battery to the west. We can range on the far shoal by timing the tracers they're throwing in bursts. Improvisation. He loves the ingenuity and despises that it is needed. Do it, he says, and the reply comes clean. For 20 seconds, he is a soldier again, not a curator of ruins. The solution works until smoke smears the tracers into a soft band, and the trick dies. Nothing remains but the pressure and the schedule. He introduces a word he has never spoken on a net in his life: economy. He orders economy of fire, not to preserve ammunition for decisive targets as the manuals intended, but to preserve the men from crushing themselves, trying to be decisive in a world that punishes decisiveness with silence. The shame is not rhetorical, it is technical. He is protecting the crew from the lag in the lines, the blackout in the eyes, the drift in the overlay. He is saying, give up the duel that flatters you. Serve the clock that ignores you. A runner returns with a new note from the switchboard: reserve trunk, stable main still dead. He catches the boy's hand, thin, powdery with dust, and feels the tremble of a bird in a fist. He realizes his own hand must feel worse. He lets go and forces his fingers to lie flat on the edge of the table until the tremor spends itself. The room dips and rights. He tastes copper. He recognizes the symptom set from a training pamphlet about blast heart, fast breath, dirty, fine motor, gone rebellious, sound tunneled, attention jumpy. He is reading his own breakdown like a checklist, and the checklist does not shame him. What shames him is that the system he served cannot read the same truth and act. Outside the slit, a crude flag appears on a pole, improvised signal for a boat wave recalculating under fire. It is ridiculous, and it works. The organism digests his suppression fire and grows around it, skinning over the hurt with new tissue at a speed that feels indecent. He gives the next order without preface in a voice gone flat. Shift remaining tubes to harass their logistics. Beach exits, not men. He has stopped hunting faces. He is shooting at time. The heartbeat slams once hard enough to make the world white at the edges, then drops to something like a working pace. The body accepts what the mind has finally admitted: kills are decorative if minutes are cheap to the enemy. He wants to tell someone the sentence that has formed and hardened in him, but there is no place for confession on a line that eats words. So he chooses an action that will stand for it. Prepare to move the observation post to the secondary now. This is the apostasy complete. The private oath was to hold sight until sight could make killing pure. He abandons sight to keep shooting at functions. The crew pauses, a single collective intake of breath that sounds like a wave in a drain, and then obeys. Kinetic follows immediate. Men lift instruments that were never meant to be lifted under fire. A mirror frame claps shut. A field phone comes off its peg. A box of overlays slithers and explodes paper into the dust. A shell lands not close and not far, exactly wrong, and every rib in the room learns its own name. They move anyway, hunched, unheroic, correct. Pluskat steps into the corridor and feels the air thin and hot and alive with steel. The shock that used to make him flinch now makes him count. 1, 2, wait, go. Shame has burned down into something else, not pride, not yet, but a cold instrument that points towards survival measures instead of medals. The turning point is not celebrated. It is filed. He files it with the other necessities that have rewritten him today: suppression over precision, economy over bravado, functions over faces. Irrelevance has done its worst and found him not empty, but altered. When he re-enters the room, the lamp is still holding its circle. Inside that circle, the overlay shows a coastline that belongs to the enemy now. He places a new sheet over it, thin, crinkling clean, and begins to draw a different kind of war. The casemate has fallen quiet enough to hear the fans think. Dust hangs in the lamp's circle like a chart of what used to be. Men speak in library tones as if a loud word might collapse the room the rest of the way. Major Werner Pluskat takes the headset off and sets it down carefully, as if it were an injured animal. The metronome in his chest has returned, but it keeps time for a different piece. He walks the corridor. The concrete sweats in thin veins. The air is metallic with cordite that has settled into the tongue. At the door, a sergeant works the bent latch with a screwdriver that was once a badge of order oiled labeled, returned to a shadow on a board at day's end. The shadow is long gone. The tool is just a tool. The latch gives. Outside, the world has the rawness of a stage after a play prop's overturned paint, scraped quiet people moving in the wreckage with purpose. A dead LCVP sits quartered on the sandbow door, canted like a broken jaw. The plate is thinner than he believed. He puts his palm against it. It is warm, with sun pebbled honest. Somewhere inside the simple geometry is a genius that refused to wait for beauty. On the ramp, hinge mud and rope fibers have found each other and decided to be a repair. He leans in and smells machine oil cheap enough to bathe in. The ramp's edge carries dents from boots that struck without ceremony, one after the other, hard enough to tattoo the steel. He looks up the beach lanes where AVRE petards have bitten the wall slots in wire, where Bangalores open mouths and the mouths never closed. Each wound is ugly. Each wound is decisive. The sergeant from the latch comes to stand beside him, hands clasped like a man whose body still believes it is in church. Herr Major, he says, voice kept flat on purpose. Do we try to salvage optics? Pluskat keeps his palm on the ramp. No, he says. The word is light and heavy at once. We salvage time. The sergeant looks at him, and in the look is the old question, what does that mean in guns? And the new answer, anything that keeps the tubes alive, another hour. He kneels, unbecoming, unbeautiful, and uses a broken pencil to measure the hinge pin's diameter against a thumbnail. They built the door to be a promise, he says, more to the steel than to the man. Not a barrier, a guarantee that men will be here on schedule. He pushes the ramp. It will not move. Sand has taken its share. The schedule moved anyway. Farther up, tucked against the shingle, an AVRE's petard cup lies like a dropped bell. He picks it up with both hands. It is heavy, more plumbing than artillery, a joke, until it erases an argument. The cup is dented, scarred with salt scorch and a scratch that spells nothing. He turns it and sees where someone chalked an arrow on the day it mattered, this way, this angle, press and fire. The instruction has the confidence of a man who believes in proximate answers. He sets the cup down and rests his fingers on a Bangalore fragment, curled like a dead leaf. It is not daring. It is not doctrine. It is a length of tube that taught the fence the meaning of temporary. He feels a calm arrive that is almost anger, because calm should belong to elegance, and instead it belongs to utility. He returns the fragment to the sand with care that feels like apology. A communications corporal picks his way down from the casemate, cradling a field phone like a loaf. Reserve trunk holds the boy, says too formal. Main remains, he stops. The sentence is tired of itself. Pluskat nods. We route around our dead, he says the words, coming out with the quiet certainty of weather. So do they. He looks at the ramp again, at the hinge scarred by many lives. They route better. The confession arrives as a sentence he can stand behind in any room. He looks at the sergeant, at the corporal, at the corner of the sky the wall failed to own. We built positions to win duels, he says. The enemy built a system to keep appointments. No one writes it down. It is not a speech. It sits in the sand like another piece of steel the tide will not take. He turns back toward the bunker. Inside, the final tally waits not numbers on a board, but the shape of arithmetic that will fit in a mouth and survive the next hour. He stands over the plotting table. The overlays, clean and crumpled and clean again, are a stack of weathered days. He lays a fresh sheet and draws the beach exits with 3 blunt strokes. He writes 2 columns without headings. Boots per minute. Corrections per minute. He taps the pencil between them. This is all that's left, he says. We can make them think. They can make them arrive. He adds a 3rd line. Guns alive per hour. Then a 4th strong point life per hour. He steps back and lets the men see the poverty and the clarity. The sergeant clears his throat. Herr Major, we can still kill. It is not defiance, more a plea to keep something sacred in the room. We will, Pluskat answers. We must. But we will choose targets as if time were our only ammunition. He circles the exits. Harass exits, not men. Smother the bridges they are building in motion. Aim at their schedule. Rate of fire equals minutes denied. The corporal braver now risks a question, and the oath he asks. He means the beautiful oath, the one that keeps a certain pride alive when you look at yourself in a mirror made of polished brass. Pluskat looks at his own hands gray in the fan's draft, the skin lined with grit where a ring might be. He speaks it straight. No waste, only kills, he recites, and then adds was written for battles that held still. Today we write a second line, no pride, only delay. The words do not taste like defeat. They taste like metal and air. He marks the map with a calm he had to earn. Final measure, he says, and the pencil makes the last column. Replacement tempo. He draws an arrow from it to the first boots per minute. Another arrow from their own to the dying guns alive per hour. The page looks like a repair diagram. It is. When replacement tempo outpaces our destruction rate, the wall is a shape, not a force. That is the confession. We admit it to adjust, not to surrender. He orders the guns re-aimed to the exits. He orders economy of fire as policy. He orders runners instead of speeches. He puts the headset on again and feels it settle like work, not ceremony. The breath comes back two and one less priestly now, more like a machinist counting threads. Before he speaks, he touches the pencil ridge that stopped the pencil earlier, the very small wall that failed to keep it from rolling. He leaves it there. Batteries, this is observer, he says, voice even. Harass beach egress. Sustain on intervals. Report only when suppressed or mobile. A plain instruction for a plain war. Outside, the tide makes new promises. The LCVP's ramp holds in its hinge, telling its simple truth, we opened enough times. The cup from the AVRE throws a small shadow that would be comic if you did not know what it did to stone. The wire fragment lies quiet and beaten. Pluskat does not bless or curse them. He accepts them into his math. When the first corrected rounds walk, the exit and stall a column that wants inland, no one cheers. A man nods and writes the minute on the margin. The minutes are the coin now, and coin can be counted. The wall has many dignities to lose yet. This one it can keep, we learned. He lets the thought stand. Then he goes back to work. The wall endures as a line on maps. The doctrine it served does not. In the days that follow, Pluskat learns to read the war from higher altitude, where shame gives way to mathematics. Reports arrive in crushed envelopes, and careful voices, strong points that fought beautifully and died on schedule. Batteries that fired correctly and were answered by weight rather than wit sectors, where genius appeared and vanished under a clear tarp of replacement. The pattern is not personal. It is mechanical. He puts the lesson into a single meter he can hand to anyone, even a man who hates numbers, landing throughput per surviving strongpoint hour. Count the bodies delivered to fighting ground per minute. Divide by how many strongpoints remain alive per hour. Watch how quickly the quotient outruns any local excellence. When the quotient rises, the wall becomes scenery. He pairs the meter to its twin, the one they can still influence guns alive per hour. Each choice now is a lever on one of those two needles, starve their exits to depress throughput, husband crews, and cables to lift guns alive. Everything else is biography. From that height, the symbols reorder themselves. The casemate, once a proof of perfection, is only a reservoir of minutes and a fragile one. The ramp on the dead LCVP, once contemptible, is a mint that strikes time on demand. The AVRE's petard cup becomes not a monster but a stapler that binds the beach to the hinterland with lanes punched through concrete. Where the old creed saw honor in elegant salvos, the new doctrine sees value in denial, per minute. How many minutes of enemy schedule can be stolen by one tube, one cable, one repositioned observer? Pluskat is no apostle. He will not compose hymns to ugliness. But he can say a true thing without adornment. The duel was never the governing form. The governing form was availability of boats, of engineers of decisions, that arrived on time even when they arrived crude. He begins to speak that way on the net, and then more quietly, in the after-action rooms that smell of wet greatcoats and pencil shavings. He asks for charts that show exit usage by 10-minute blocks rather than kill claims. He draws arrows not to targets but to processes, ferry cycles, smoke schedules, relay points. He stops asking whether a shot was beautiful. He asks whether it bought seconds. There is grace in this stern and limited. A crew spared by economy becomes a gun tomorrow. A wire rerouted with indifference to elegance becomes a speaking line at the hour it matters. A commander who can say delay not pride keeps a sector coherent long enough for men behind him to do their work and fall back alive. It is not romantic. It is war as production. His closing principles fit on a card the size of a palm. Men pass it without ceremony because it needs none. Perfection can win a duel. Availability wins a war. And when the tide turned, availability came ashore in waves.